Where do you feel you stand as a Manchester United fan? Are you sad for him? Do you have any sympathy, or are you delighted he's gone?
I'm delighted personally. I'm delighted because I feel like, as you mentioned, 38% win ratio. It was the last 14 months has probably been one of the worst 14 months of my life as a Manchester United fan. It was just, not only was it the results were not going well. Now this season the results have been indifferent. We've won 8 games, we've drawn 7. So it's kind of even. But when you look at the totality of his spell, we've always wanted some moment of inspiration, just something to really get behind. And I don't think at any stage with Ruben Amorim we got that. I mean, even goes down to a new manager bounce. We didn't get a new manager bounce, what they always say. We didn't get that. We played boring football. We played a way that we're not used to at Manchester United with a manager who we think, in my opinion, was very, very stubborn. There was some times where it's clear, make this change in game. It's clear, maybe make this change pre-game. And he wanted to stay in his ways, I think, just a little bit too long. And it got to this stage of the season where I don't want it to all be on Ruben Amorim, though. I think Ineos's handling of of Ten Hag and Ruben Amorim has not been good enough. And, it took for him to call out call out Ineos for them to sack him. But it's like, hold on a second. It wasn't Grimsby Town. It wasn't 19 losses in the Premier League with only 15 wins. It wasn't the Europa League final. For them to sack him just because he mentioned their incompetence. It's a real red flag on Ineos for me.
Yeah, if there was a post-mortem of Manchester United right now, they always say that a fish rots from the head down. So what is the head of Manchester United? Is it Ruben Amorim? Is it the manager? Or is it the club in general, do you think, Cams?
I feel like there's not a clear direction. Even with what you're saying there in terms of who is the head, I feel like when Sir Jim comes into his interviews, he's spoken about 4 times since he's been in charge of it at United. And it feels like he's very much delegating it to others. But then when you look at who are handling Omar Barada, Jason Wilcox, Christopher Vivell, it's like, who is in charge of what? Who is actually doing what? And in fact, Jason Wilcox's job title has changed like 2-3 times already since he's been here. So it's like, we don't really know who's in charge here. There's reports coming out that Christopher Vivell had a big impact in Ruben Amorim going. But I'm like, aren't you just meant to be on transfers? Like, I'm actually confused as to who is making decisions. Then there's talks that he had a bust up with Jason Wilcox, and it's really just too much confusion. And even the appointment of Ruben Amorim, you think about how much issues that caused. You brought in Dan Ashworth after chasing him, unsettling him at Newcastle, saying you're going to pay his compensation fee. We get him, and then he doesn't want Ruben Amorim. You sack him, and then Jason Wilcox doesn't want Ruben Amorim, but you listen to Omar Barada and take. So it's like, who is really calling the shots here? I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe needs to be really clear with who is doing what at the football club.
It's a great point, Camps. And Ian, good point for you to come in here, because you've been following Manchester United for a long time and writing about them. Where does the fault lie for you? Because it feels like the finger of blame is being pointed in quite a few different directions right now.
Yeah, where does the blame lie? Well, when things go wrong, everybody takes a share of the blame. It's just the same as when a club does well. If you look at a club like Manchester City or a club like Liverpool, and you start to talk about who to thank for winning league titles, and it goes all the way up from the players through the coach, through the people who hired the coach, to the people who scout the players and sign the players and recommend the players. So everybody takes a share of it. Some are always more eager to put their hands up for the credit than others. And of course, when it goes wrong, nobody wants to put their hand up. The fact is that, again, as Cams has suggested quite eloquently there, the blame lies with everybody. Amorim was a gamble, okay? He was a gamble appointment, because if you've only managed in the Portuguese league, this sounds disrespectful, but it's just true. Portuguese is not an elite league when you compare it to the Premier League or to La Liga, for example, or even the Bundesliga. It's a second tier league. So when you take someone from there, it's always a gamble, because that's the only evidence that you've got to base your decision.
Hold on, Mark disagrees a little bit with you, just to hold you up.
I wouldn't say Portugal's like a second tier league. I would say Portugal still have strong following. I wouldn't say it's that bad, Ian.
No, I
You know
mean,
what
in terms of the quality,
there's a lot of quality coaches. Around the world at the moment, there's a lot of quality coaches come from Portugal.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, there are. And if you look at somebody like, Marcus Silva, who is 100% one of those coaches, he had to do an awful lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, through Hull and Watford and Everton, and then I think Saudi, and now doing very well at Fulham. So it's taken him. You could even look at a Spanish coach such as Unai Emery. Look at what Unai Emery's had to do to get to where he is now with Aston Villa. Got the job at Arsenal too soon, went back to Spain, did very, very well, and came again in the Premier League. They were asking Amorim to make the biggest step of all, and it is the biggest step of all to join Manchester United. No matter what anybody says, it is the biggest step of all. It is the hardest job in the Premier League for reasons that I've spoken about before on this podcast. So it was a gamble to ask him to go from the Portuguese league straight to Manchester United without a stepping stone was a gamble, and it's failed.
So,
it's failed.
So Cams,
it's failed.
Coming back in on that, Cams, do you think Amorim ever had a chance of succeeding at United?
I mean, when the higher ups can't decide if you're the right man or not, you're already starting on the back foot, But I do think they instantly did give him kind of the floor to do what he wanted. When you think about, Marcus Rashford, you think about Garnacho, these are 2 players from Carrington, and they gave him backing to basically say, okay, you want to get rid of him? Get rid of him. In fact, they were backing him so much because there's a lot of talk that he hasn't been backed, but they were even backing him to the point that they might have let Kobe Mainoo leave the football club. So I do think they did back him and give him an opportunity. They signed players this summer to kind of accommodate for what he wanted. Was it a perfect summer? Maybe not. We needed some centre midfielders, and I think we need a left-sided player as well. And I understand that he wanted Ollie Watkins, but we got in a Benjamin Sesko and stuff. So there is always going to be a little bit of pulling when it comes to the transfers. But I do think the board basically said, you've got free reign to do what you want to do up until a certain point. I think he would say that they pulled the plug on him too early in terms of they gave him some power and then all of a sudden the results didn't work and they tried to reel it in. I understand that, but I think it's a results game at the end of the day as well. And I don't think he was delivering enough results for Manchester United fans and for the board to say, do you know what? The direction that you're going in is correct. And in fact, we're going to give you 250 more million when you haven't improved any players at the football club already. So I think that was the worry.
I'm keen for you boys to pinpoint the moment you think he actually was, the moment the board didn't fancy him anymore, or the higher ups, as you called them, Cams. Because for me, when Amorim was applauding a young centre half passing the ball out of play, that was a moment for me. At Manchester United, well done, congratulations. You didn't have an option, you passed that out of play. Ian, that for me was a really alarming piece of management. But what about you?
I think the problem with Amorim was essentially very simple, is that he was hired as a really promising coach. He had a reputation as one of Europe's brightest coaches. And it's that at which he has failed. His coaching hasn't been good enough. And I keep banging on about this, but I'm going to say it one more time. Manchester United, because they're not in Europe this season, and because they got knocked out of the Carabao Cup in August, Manchester United have been playing 1 game a week. 1 game a week since August, apart from the occasional midweek Premier League game, okay? They've been playing 1 game a week. So that gives you 2 things as a coach. It gives you time on the training ground, which all these other teams who are bombing around Europe and playing on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday don't have. It gives you time on the training ground, and it gives you freshness in your players on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon. And Amorim, therefore, that was Amorim's gift this season. And any coach who really was an elite coach would have used that time to obviously and tangibly improve players and teams, and he hasn't done it. And I think that ultimately for me, that is the thing that sprung the trapdoor. Whatever incident, whatever row there might have been with Wilcox, etc., that ultimately is what's done for him.
I mean, Mark, ultimately, you understand the situation from your position as a referee. If you speak out about the people who employ you in a controversial fashion, it's a gross misconduct contractually. And it did feel like a Maresco, didn't it?
Yeah, no, it was always going to happen, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting to listen to the boys. You look at Amorim and he's done what he had to do at the start of his Manchester United management career. He's got rid of some of the players that were everybody thought needed to be moved on big wages. But it felt his last comments that he's the manager of Manchester United, not the head coach, was the telltale sign for me that he wasn't given his tools to do the job in the summer. He was given the tools
true,
by.
Mark. It's not true. It's not
Do you
true,
think?
mate.
Do you think Sesko? Do you think Sesko was his signing? And it'll be interesting to get Cam's point on this.
Look,
is Sesko his signing, or was it Amorim's signing, or was it Wilcox's signing?
He works in a modern football structure. Okay.
Yeah, no,
And
this is the conversation we'll have later on.
Mark, and he knew what that structure was when he arrived. So if you're going to say, poor old Ruben Amorim was given Benjamin Sesko, well, I honour it. He was also given a significant upgrade on his goalkeeper and two excellent forward players in Cunha and Mbumo. Okay. So if you're going to say, he was given a dud in Sesko, and let's find out.
I'm not saying that, Ian. If you look at results,
have it both ways, Mark.
No, but you've got just Ian. Good point. But if we're looking at movement forward, and we can always criticise him and on the training ground and everything else. Manchester United are sixth place at the moment in the Premier League. Yes, the style of play is not good enough for Manchester United. Manchester United need to be where they need to be because they're such a big club. Unfortunately, now football isn't about that. There's no such thing as big clubs anymore because these big clubs now are fighting. You've got Liverpool coming in, City, Chelsea, Newcastle. All these clubs now are fighting. Manchester United are a global brand. I get it. But you look at Emery, for example. When Emery came in at Aston Villa in the big fight, what happened to the sporting director? Gone. Who's got control of Aston Villa now? Emery.
Very rare.
I think
that is very, very
I know
rare.
it is, but we're going to have this conversation. 2 seconds, Ian. We're going to have that conversation in the next show. But what's interesting is when you have these sporting directors and the fight that's created, you're seeing it in Nottingham Forest now with Edu, and all of a sudden, if the transfers aren't right, the coach is the one that gets the blame. He's not a manager anymore. He's the coach. And if the coach doesn't get the tools that he wants to play his style of football, then it becomes a problem. And I get both sides of the argument. We'll never know the full truth, who signed what player or how Amorim wants to play. He wanted to play a certain way. And if you look at Sesko, for example, or Gyökeres, who we had at Sporting Lisbon, the two different players. Gyökeres runs his heart out, he runs the channels, he runs everything. Sesko is a completely different player to where Amorim wants to play.
Cams, let's bring you back in on this one, right? You can hear Ian's view, you can hear Mark's view there, but where do you see it? I mean, there is a structure, as Ian says, that you agree to when you sign up. You can't renegotiate that at this point of your career.
Yeah, I think so. When he did make them comments, I was like, maybe there's something behind the scenes that we didn't know about. So when I searched his name onto his appointment, I wanted to see if there's any article or anything that says he's the manager of Manchester United. And there's not one thing out there that says he is going to be the manager of Manchester United. Like even the official ManchesterUnited.com says head coach appointment. So I do kind of think that he's walked into the club understanding what he wants. I just think that he is not happy being told onto how to set up his team, because the reports are saying that Jason Wilcox basically said, you need to be a little bit more tactically flexible. And, there's also reports saying that Ravel was absolutely stunned when Iwobi basically came out and just broke down Manchester United's setup in a 2-minute interview. So I think they looked at it and thought, wow, tactically we are way behind.
That was a key point, wasn't it? That's a key moment here, isn't it? If you've got somebody in a press conference and ripping apart the 3-4-3, and he did it beautifully, actually, didn't he? And then you see apparently there's emails being sent around the hierarchy of the club discussing that. That seems to be a trigger point, Cams, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it might have been there was a manager that did it last season, but you thought to yourself, Arne Slot, yeah. And you thought to yourself, okay, Liverpool on a roll, Onslaught's come in, he's going crazy in the Premier League, whatever. Maybe he's a tactically brilliant. But when Iwobi, just a Premier League player, he doesn't really speak too much about tactics ever, just breaks us down that easily. It definitely was alarming. And I think Amorim is mainly talking about he doesn't want interference with his tactics. Now, transfers, I think he would have always understood that you're not going to get everyone that you want. At the end of the day, Victor Gyökeres, he's not doing the greatest anyway, and that was his first choice, and Gyökeres chose Arsenal. So when you look at what he wanted, I'm not going to speak about like what they would have done at Man United. You never really know. But I don't think his big problem is necessarily the transfers. I do think once Jason Wilcox started coming down often and saying be tactically flexible, maybe go to a back four, I think that's when he started saying, hey, listen, I need to do my job. If you guys are not going to believe in me to even do my job on the training pitch, then what do we have here? And I think that was his final straw. But we've got to remember, he's been threatening to walk since last season. And it's like, mate, nobody's begging you to stay. You're not doing a good enough job. You know what I mean? No, you're not doing a good enough job to talk like that, you know? Like, he's been threatening, like, if they don't want me, they can bring another guy. He's been saying that for a long time. And I think now it's like, hold on a second, mate. You've crossed the line now.
Crossed the line.